Hi, how are you? Shin Kishioka again. Hope to see you guys back. So let's get started. If you haven't subscribed, shared, or liked the channel, please do so. And today we'll be doing the business more on people and society again. Just to recap, I think the last time we went over some of these things. Japan being the size of California and 3.8% of the land of the United States, but 38% of the population of the United States lives there. So you can see the density of Japan as well as ethnicity backgrounds compared to the US, and Japan being 97 to 98% of the people being in Japan are Japanese. And last name society, we went over this. We'll cover this again today a little bit so that you can better understand. Gonna add a little bit more words to that. And GDP size comparison, parts of Japan could be represented by some of the European countries in terms of size of GDP. So those illustrate the size of Japan and the density and the ethnic backgrounds. And Rochelle Cupp's book, Paper Rice Ceiling, to understand the culture difference. And part two, the last time we went over the Guinness World Record holder lifespan of Japanese, and also not only people but the companies are quite old as well. The oldest company in the world is in Japan, 1,440 years old, and their top five oldest companies in the world are from Japan, which is over 1,200 years old, and 56% of oldest companies in the world are in Japan. And so that tells us a little bit about the history and how the business practices and the communication are all affected by those backgrounds. And as I illustrated here in this chart last time, we went over some of the things that are done differently and more conservatively based on the fact that they are startups in Japan. The companies are loaning the money to pay back, and so they want to be sure and steady with security, less risk. Whereas in the United States, it started up with mostly as a part of investment, seed fund, investment money. So that dynamic business is relatively important with faster growth. Quarterly EBITDA are more focused. So longer cycle product development cycle business are stronger in Japan than shorter development speed cycle are becoming weaker in Japan. So those tell us that their vision or business roadmaps are much longer, and longer the R&D, such as steel, automotive, and those areas are very strong in Japan, the materials development. So I think the hybrid part of US and Japan would be very good to combine them together to make the companies stronger. And however, the younger generations startups are working on that, and they're much different from the traditionals. And we went over the cultural map by Lewis model and see how each of the countries, there's some cultural backgrounds different. Hope you went over those. So today, I'm gonna go back to this slide again. I entered these or displayed macro to micro, micro to macro, the U.S. to Japan's difference, so that you may understand Japan enters conversation, discussion, or business, any process from a macro vision to and then to micro in that order. Typically, not always, but it's good to know. Sometimes you may feel hesitant or lose patience in getting to the micro level of the details of the discussion or communication or the status of things. Whereas in the US, you go right down to the pinpoint and then towards more of a macro side later. As it's just the tendencies of difference that we see. And so diversification gap we went over a little bit earlier. Put this down into a chart format so that you understand a little bit better as I'm also studying deeper right now, homogeneity and heterogeneity. How does that make a difference? So Japan has, I explained that 97%, 98% are Japanese living in Japan, whereas US is much, much more diverse. Not just ethnicity, but product choice due to the difference in the demand or taste and or cultural background. So homogeneity market or people has much less narrower choice, so that they tend to make differentiation by value adds around the core. So they tend to ask in the business scene, for example, it says that the business open bid format, which means that they ask for a quote or proposal, but they ask you to come up with 3 to 5 different patterns or combinations of proposals. Or in the United States or some of the other parts of the country or world, are more the customers will tell you more right down to the point what they exactly want, so that you know what to propose. So analogy, I don't know if you like it or not. I picked Apple, for example, to keep it simple. In Japan, they tell you to quote an apple, a lot of apple. So whatever the one lot could mean. Typically, when the Japanese ask for an apple, they would try to quote and come up with different combinations, several of them. For example, in Japan, the good apples typically are brand names are Fuji, Mutsu, Tsugaru, and those are the majors. And so they will quote equivalent of that. The pretty much falls into certain sizes and quality and price range. So and then they would add value, additional service or lead time or the management of inventory, other surrounding part of the business or supply chain. In the United States, when you ask that kind of question, they would ask a million questions back to you, right? So they'll be asking, what's the purpose and what are you going to use the apples for? Where's the destination? What's the frequency of the order? And just so many questions, variables, which could make the price so different depending on the answers. So when you are stuck or feel that the communication is or conversation is not very smooth, you might want to think that the Japanese are thinking due to the homogeneity, and then you might want to point to them that we have a lot of choices, so that we need to narrow down from the beginning, so that it doesn't cause us additional cost by making the choices or fixing or adjusting later on during the course of our business or arrangements. So the diversification gap is important to be aware, and so you might want to lead them and also understand their situation and then thinking in order to make that communication more fruitful. And another analogy, too many analogies, but sorry, this is a good one. Are you a peach culture or coconuts? It's another analogy that these professors came up by analyzing different culture. So this Harvard Business Review covered it also, but I strongly feel that and understand that there are some analogy that very effective to understand the different cultures. So in case of peach, I feel that the peach culture is United States or Americans, and then coconuts is very much Japanese, where the shell outside is very hard versus peach. Outside is very soft. So outside layer is typically they describe it as a public space, where the inside or seed is the private space. So I try to simplify and organize a little bit how Japan versus U.S. In case of peach versus coconuts. And when you meet with the Americans or other peach-based culture people, they're friendly and very open. They easy to get along in the beginning, get to know each other, and the hurdles are very low. People tend to think, "Oh, this is so great. We became friends or are good colleagues and with good partners." However, peach culture, you have to be careful that once you get into the seed private space, and you have to get into there eventually, but then all of a sudden the seed is very hard to break in. So you might want to take extra steps and understand each other better in order to get a closer relationship from certain time. Where coconuts is completely opposite. So when you meet with some of the Japanese business people or professionals or even students, they have outside shell that is very, very hard and stiff. Although they don't look or act so inside, there are some uh, hurdles or barriers of some sort. But once you break that, the inside private is almost seamlessly integrated with the public. So public private are very, very tightly connected and tied up. So you might want to, when you deal with Japanese, you might want to have as much or many common public space together, such as membership, clubs, or background, schools, or organizations that you belong to or with, so that you have something to share. For example, common customers could be a good example, and that would be very, very effective. Once you tell certain very difficult to break into the door clients, you mentioned that you have a client, NASA as a client, or for example, other Toyota being the clients, and they eyes all of a sudden open up, and oh, why didn't you tell us that earlier? Then that's a completely different story. But how I haven't changed a bit. What difference does it make? However, those make their feelings better, and that secures and almost like gives a measure of security of common clients or certain scale or class of a customer allows them to it's almost like you're endorsed. And also, if you have a certain or belong to a certain club or a school, that breaks certain barriers as well. So those makes a big difference, and you might want to be able to have very common Japanese baseball, for example, for sports as a hobby, or go watch the game, for example. So there are varieties of ways to get these shells break to get inside and get closer relationship. And based on parts of the world, there are some differences due to the length of history and mixture of ethnicity. So you might want to, there's no stereotype or common models, but depending on where you are, you might want to reflect back to the slide, the size of peach. There could be some hybrid model culture, a little bit of coconuts and peach versus peach getting smaller, and coconuts getting larger, depending on where you are. But some people has both aspects, and it's better to understand and communicate, respect their privacy as well as public space, and respect their public figures or status. United States is mostly, I call it hyper, super, ultra club membership society. So as you try to go into a higher society, business people or higher ranked officers or C corporate officer classes of large Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, they are club society where people has to endorse you in order to be invited to become a member of the club. So try to brush up yourself, and that is very true in Japan in the beginning side because of the coconuts. So try to have as much and many things in common and belong to certain clubs, organizations, and hobbies in order to break those and then be able to be endorsement tools that will back you up. And we'll get into more details about the business side of organizational differences, and how they do business differently from now on. And another book that's recommended would be Culture Map by Erin Meyer. It's a really good book that talks all about these in more detail. So if you have any questions, you might want to go back these books. And I'm trying to launch some session, hopefully in Zoom session or other tools applications, but be able to talk to our past interns as well as some of the American colleagues and partners who will be able to do some of the role playing in the future. But thanks for joining with me, and hope clarify some of the things and improve on my voice quality, sound quality of the recording. And I apologize for the very poor sound in the past. Hope to see you again. Thank you.